What is going on, everybody? Shwazy here, and in today's video we're going to be reviewing the all-new facelifted 2024 Mercedes Benz AMG GLE 63S. It's definitely a mouthful, but it is an incredible vehicle. In today's video we're going to talk exterior, interior, we're going to talk about the powertrain pricing, then we're going to get behind the wheel and take this for a test drive. So if you guys are in the market for a GLE 63, or maybe you just want to know what all the latest and greatest is all about, then I suggest you stay tuned for the whole video. But we got a lot to discuss, so let's get started. Okay, so about the AMG GLE 63S. Now, before we get started, I briefly want to talk about the history of the GLE. For those of you that don't know, this was previously called the ML class, and it was released back in 1997 as a body-on-frame SUV. It was actually Mercedes' first real venture into the crossover segment, and it was even featured in Jurassic Park. But of course, that vehicle has gone through several different generations. In 2015, they renamed it the GLE, but this is the fourth generation of the ML/GLE, and this was introduced back in 2019 as a 2020 model year. But here for 2024, they've actually done a complete facelift, so it's kind of a mid-cycle refresh. The front end and the back end is a little bit different, and that's what we're going to be showing off in today's video. So starting off with the front end, you do have a different headlamp assembly for the 2024 model year. It looks a little bit different. The previous version had like two different LED stripes. This one just has one with some 4 LED dots over here around the headlamp assembly. Coming over to the grille, it has also been revised and changed a little bit. Definitely a little bit more aggressive than the current version of the 2023 model year. And then coming down, you also have this being the AMG, a really aggressive front splitter. Now, some of this is some fake venting over here, but it does still look pretty aggressive, and I do like the brushed aluminum accents on this particular AMG version. The front end just looks really menacing, really mean. You also do have another Mercedes emblem, so there's no mistaking this for any other vehicle. It also says Mercedes-Benz even on the headlamp assembly, so that's kind of cool. Now, this is actually a new color option for 2024. It's called the Twilight Blue Metallic, and there's actually two new color options, and there's two new choices on the interior, which we'll get to. Now, coming over to the side, not a huge difference for the facelift. They kind of left this mostly unchanged, but let's talk about the AMG exterior. So you do have these body painted fender flares, which looks really nice, kind of matches the theme of the vehicle. And then coming down here, these are AMG specific wheels and tires, and they look really good. These are Michelin Pilot Sports. They're actually 285/40 22-inch wheels, so that's pretty massive. And then take a look at that brake caliper. Now, this particular vehicle does have the carbon ceramic brakes, so they're upgraded option. They're pretty massive, and they are a bit sensitive, especially when you're just driving in day-to-day traffic. But these are 16.5 6-piston front brake calipers, and they're absolutely massive. I mean, that's over a foot of just brake caliper. I should also mention you do have a ride control air suspension, so inside the vehicle, and depending on what drive mode you're in, you can actually adjust the height of this vehicle. And I'm going to throw some footage up on the screen right now to show you what that looks like as you're changing it using the knob inside of the vehicle. And it does actually make a pretty big difference in terms of height. It goes up and down a few inches, giving it a sportier stance when you need it, or a more rugged stance if you're going off-roading. Now, coming further back, you do have the V8 bi-turbo, and we'll talk about the powertrain here in just a few minutes. And then the rest of it is mostly unchanged. I do like the brushed aluminum look over here. Not too much of a body line that runs from front to back. It's not super aggressive on the side. You do have a small body line over here on the door panels. And then coming over to the top, you do have a brushed aluminum roof rail. Again, a little bit more of that chrome accents. I like that they didn't just go for a blacked out look like a lot of other vehicles do when they choose a sportier version. This one still has that luxurious chrome or brushed aluminum look to it, but it also has that performance under the hood. Now, coming to the back, this is what I really want to talk about. These are some beefy tires back here. You're looking at 325/35 22-inch wheels, so 325 millimeter, just to give you a frame of reference. That is gigantic. I mean, my Hellcat wide body has 305, so this is quite a big difference between the two. Coming over to the back, they also revised some things on this facelift, specifically the tail light assembly. So this does look a little bit different than the current 2023 model year, but just some subtle changes. Obviously, a mid-cycle refresh is never really that significant in terms of changes, but kind of keeps it fresh. You do have the GLE 63S badge. Now, just so you know, there's two AMGs. There's a GLE 53 and GLE 63S. You do have a nice chrome strip over here, and then moving further towards the bottom, you do have the AMG splitter at the back, and I do love these AMG tailpipes. They look really nice, and you do actually have tailpipes in there. This isn't just like a single outlet or anything like that. Now, in case you're wondering about sizing of this two-row crossover, this is actually about 195 inches long, so pretty comparable to some of the competition like the BMW X5M and the Porsche Cayenne Turbo. Now, you can get the option of a third row seat, but I don't believe you can get that in the AMG version. Okay, next up, let's talk powertrain. But before we talk about the behemoth that's under the hood of this GLE 63, let's talk about all the different options you can get for the 2024 model year for the GLE. Well, starting off, there's actually 6 different powertrains. The first one is the GLE 350. Now, no longer can you get that one in rear-wheel drive. The entire GLE lineup is now 4MATIC, all-wheel drive, and the GLE 350 now has an upgraded engine. So the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder now has the integrated mild hybrid system, which I'll talk about in just a second here, and that allows the vehicle to get up to 255 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. The GLE 350 will do 0 to 60 in just about 7 seconds. Now, if the 350 isn't enough power for you, then you can step up to the GLE 450, which has a 3-liter turbocharged inline-6, along with the integrated starter motor similar to the GLE 350, and that one produces 375 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 on the 450 is just around 5.3 seconds. Now, a new powertrain for 2024 is actually a plug-in hybrid. It's called the GLE 450E, and that one comes with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder paired with a 23.3 kilowatt battery, and that one produces about 381 horsepower and a whopping 479 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 for the 450E is estimated at 5.9 seconds, but you do have some of that day-to-day driving on electric power, which is a big advantage, especially as we head into an electric future. Now, stepping up from the 450 is the GLE 580, and that one gets into some pretty big boy territory. You're looking at a 4-liter twin turbo V8, very similar to actually this one under the hood, and that one produces 510 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Pretty impressive figures. 0 to 60 for the 580 is 4.3 seconds. Now, the last 2 models are both AMGs. You can get a GLE 53, which comes with a 3-liter inline-6 turbocharged engine that produces about 429 horsepower and 413 pound-feet of torque. Those are improved figures from the 2023 model year. Now, 0 to 60 has also improved. You're looking at about 4.9 seconds. And finally, I've saved the greatest for last. That is, of course, the big boy GLE 63S. This is a hand-built 4-liter twin turbocharged engine that produces a whopping 603 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. This thing will do 0 to 60 in just about 3.7 seconds. Now, since it is hand-built, you can see the individual that built this vehicle in Germany, which is pretty amazing. I love seeing that under the hood. But there's some interesting mechanics that I mentioned earlier that I want to kind of expand upon, and that is the integrated starter motor. So that is the mild hybrid system that Mercedes has been starting to introduce in a lot of models. I think the S-Class in 2018 was the first vehicle with this mild hybrid system. So it's essentially an electric motor that's paired with a 48-volt hybrid powertrain that actually adds upwards of 21 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque to the engine. So the output figures I just quoted are the combined between the electric starter motor and the internal combustion engine. And what this does is essentially makes the engine a beltless engine. So you don't have to have a belt to run the air conditioning, the water pump. All of that is actually powered by this electric motor. And it also powers some of the interior accessories as well. And it also powers the electric start-stop system. So as you're approaching a stoplight, this vehicle will actually turn off before you come to a complete stop. And that's because you have this 48-volt power system that can actually run the electronics for a longer period of time without having the engine running. Now, the other advantage of this electric starter motor is it will actually keep the RPMs of the vehicle pretty low when you're idling. You're looking at just around 500 RPM because you don't need this engine revving up a lot higher to run the electronics in the vehicle. So a pretty interesting system. It's kind of the best of both worlds, where you have an electric powertrain and an internal combustion engine, and you get higher output figures because of the two running together. The other advantage of the electric starter motor is MPG, because you do save a little bit when you're coasting on electric power. And for being a 4-liter V8 twin turbo engine, doesn't have too bad of MPG. You're looking at 15 in the city and 20 on the highway. Now, all of that power, regardless of which powertrain you pick on the GLE is sent through a 9-speed automatic transmission. Now, in case you're wondering about towing capacity, it's actually really impressive. Every single GLE can tow up to 7,700 pounds. Okay, now let's jump inside and talk about the interior. Now, as much as I love the look of the exterior of this vehicle, I think the interior is my favorite part, so we might spend a little bit of time in here. Now, starting off with the door panel, everything is soft touch material. You do have like a really nice leather stitching to it. I mean, everything just feels so nice and soft and plush. I mean, that's what you would expect from a vehicle at this price point. You do have some really nice real aluminum trim all around the door panel. Now, you can get wood trim in a variety of different options as well. This particular one has the aluminum, and I think it fits well for the AMG trim level. You also have these aluminum buttons for your seat controls. You do have heated and ventilated seats, and then you do have a button to control the passenger seat if it's, you know, getting in the way, or maybe they're getting out of line. And then I do love this 13 speaker Burmester audio system. I mean, that speaker grill alone is worth the price, and the AMG does come with that as standard. And you also have a 590 watt amplifier. Now, what's interesting about the speaker system is the Mercedes actually integrated what they call the front bass system, where the subwoofer is actually kind of integrated into the frame. And so it uses the resonance of the frame to create that subwoofer bass sound to it. There's a lot of audio engineering that well above my pay grade, but it is kind of interesting to talk about. Now, moving further down on the door panel, everything is again leather wrapped. I do like this beige black leather. This is actually a new color option for the 2024 model year, one of two. And then you do have nice aluminum bezels on the door handle, and then aluminum buttons for your window switches. Moving further down, you do have some hard touch plastic, and then you have a storage compartment and a cup holder, and then a button to open up your lift gate. Now, moving towards the seats, you do have some suede or Alcantara with leather. I do like that contrast. I love the white color. Not sure how it's going to hold up the test of time when you're wearing blue jeans, but people who buy these cars do not wear blue jeans, of course. You do have a really soft headrest, and then these do have 8 different types of massaging seats. Everything from a hot stone massage to just your cushion to just the seat back. So many different options. And I gotta say, this is probably the best massaging seat I've had in a vehicle, even though there haven't been very many vehicles that I've tested with massaging seats. You do have lots of different adjustments here as well. So not only are they massaging, but you can adjust the lumbar support. You can adjust where the heated seats are actually directed. And at the same time, this vehicle has something called seat kinetics, which essentially will move the seat just a little bit every so often so that your legs or your muscles don't fall asleep on longer road trips. It does feel a little bit weird at first, but you kind of get used to it. Now, moving in from the door panel, you do have your light controls on the left-hand side with some additional nice aluminum bezels. Looks really good. And then starting off with the steering wheel, this is actually an update for 2024. The previous version had kind of the older steering wheel. This one is more similar to some of the other AMG products, but this is going to be carried across the GLE line. On the left-hand side, you have your buttons to control your instrument gauge cluster display, and it's all touch-sensitive buttons. So you simply have to swipe or, you know, push down on a haptic feedback type of button, and that's how you actually go through the menus on your instrument gauge cluster display. Moving further down from that first row of buttons, you have your cruise control settings. This does have adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keep, lane centering, and this thing will change lanes on the freeway, and I'll show you what that looks like when we get behind the wheel and drive it. On the right-hand side of the steering wheel, that's where you have your touch-sensitive controls, very similar to the left-hand side, but that is going to control the center infotainment screen. So each set of buttons kind of controls its own screen. You do have two 12.3-inch screens over here, so lots of screen real estate on the interior. Now, moving down from the steering wheel, from controlling your infotainment screen, you do have your buttons for your audio settings, your voice activation, stuff like that. Now, I will say the touch-sensitive controls do take a little bit of getting used to. The one thing I will say, though, is that the volume control is kind of this touch-sensitive slider, and I kind of wish they somehow would have integrated a physical button for your volume, because it does seem like sometimes it goes a little bit too loud when you're swiping or a little too quiet. Now, fortunately, you do have a volume control in the center arm console, but rather than take your hands off the steering wheel, I wish there was some sort of physical control to be able to adjust the volume. Now, further down from the steering wheel, you do have these light up buttons, or switches. I don't even know what to call them. And these are pretty interesting. And I've reviewed this in the AMG GT as well. On the right-hand side, you have your button to manipulate the different driving modes. So you have everything from individual to comfort to sport, sport plus. You also have a race mode, and you just simply turn the dial, and that's how you circulate through the different drive modes. And you can push the button, and then it will actually open up the drive modes on your infotainment screen. Now on the left-hand side, that button is a little bit more robust. So if you tap the top of the screen, you'll actually go through different settings on the top portion of the screen. And then if you tap the bottom, you'll go through a different set of menus on the bottom screen. And what that does is it's essentially your quick access buttons. And in order to activate them, you actually push the switch on the left-hand side of the toggle, and that will activate the certain feature or whatever page you're on. So for example, if you want to turn off your start-stop system, you simply navigate to that part of the screen, and then you push on that toggle, and then it will turn off your start-stop system. Now the steering wheel itself is nice leather wrapped. You can actually get a variety of different steering wheels, and I do like the golf ball texture that kind of feels good in the hands. You do also have aluminum paddle shifters, which feel really good, and they work really quickly. The 9-speed auto is fantastic. On the left-hand side, you have your windshield wiper controls, pretty intuitive stuff. It does have automatic windshield wipers. And on the right-hand side, you have your gear selector for your drive, parking, reverse, etc. Now, moving up to the infotainment screen, to the left of it, you do have your vents, which kind of integrate into this platform where the screen actually sits. But the instrument gauge cluster is very, very robust. So not only do you have, your typical menus like tire pressure, mileage, service, all of that stuff that you find in pretty much every car nowadays, but you also have different themes. So you have everything from like a race theme to just your understated theme if you feel like everything's a little bit too cluttered. You even have something called an off-road theme if you do choose to off-road your $120,000 vehicle. So lots of different menus there, and not only does it change the instrument gauge cluster, it also changes the theme of your infotainment screen. So you kind of have to stick to a theme throughout the entire vehicle, and then if you get tired of it, you can swipe away and choose something else. Now, if you swipe up on the steering wheel, you'll actually go through a few different themes for your head-up display. And it's a pretty robust head-up display. You have everything from your RPM to your speed to your navigation system. I mean, it is a pretty massive section of the windshield that you do have to get used to, but luckily they do have some more subtle head-up displays that don't really get in the way as you're driving. Now, moving further in, lots to talk about. Like I said, you do have this 12.3-inch infotainment screen. You do have wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. Those things are all standard. But not only is this a touchscreen, you can also manipulate it with this haptic feedback mouse that's located in the center arm console. So there's plenty of different ways to actually manipulate the system. There's a lot of redundancies here, and you can actually use your voice activation to pretty much do the exact same stuff. So there's 4 different ways to control the center display. And you have everything from your comfort settings, which is where you're going to manipulate the massage seats and the ambient lighting. Need I say, there's like a dozen different types of ambient lighting themes, and you can also just pick a monochrome color if you just want to stick to one theme on the interior. So it's a very customizable interior, and I will say the ambient lighting is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, Mercedes is probably the leader in terms of ambient lighting, and this GLE is no exception to that. I mean, you can go through so many different colors. It's like an orchestra of different colors on the inside, and every time I've had somebody sit inside this vehicle, they're absolutely amazed with the beauty of that ambient lighting. It really is gorgeous, and props to Mercedes for doing that. But then you can also manipulate your audio, your media. So lots of different functionality in the center display. You can also, of course, look up the weather. You can open up your AMG performance pages, which includes everything from where the power is being sent, how much horsepower, what incline or grade you're on, along with your fuel consumption if you really want to see that in AMG mode. And then you do actually have a dash cam recorder in this vehicle as well, which is a really nice feature. I think every car should have that nowadays because of how crazy some people are out there on the roads. Now, moving further down, you do have a set of 4 air vents, and for 2024, they've actually covered these with like a brushed aluminum texture. That's kind of a new feature for this model year. And then again, a little bit more of that aluminum bezel that goes all the way to the passenger side and the door panel. And then below here, for those of you that hate touchscreen controls, you do have a set of manual switches and buttons which feel really nice for your climate control. So you can easily manipulate the temperature, the fan speed. You can even open the menu for your climate control where you can go into a much more robust set of settings, including your air ionizer, which will actually purify the air coming into the vehicle. It will even tell you how good the air is outside the vehicle. And you have something called the fragrance system, which is actually a little compartment located in the glove box where you can actually put a AMG or Mercedes fragrance, and this thing will pump that inside of the cabin, and you can choose from 3 different levels of fragrance on your interior in case, somebody in the car is a little bit smelly. But anyways, you could also manipulate the second row row of seats because they do have their own climate control using the front screen. And so there's a lot of buttons that you can click to get to the menu you want to without actually having to hunt around for it inside of this MBUX system. And it's a pretty robust system overall. Like you can say something like, "Hey Mercedes,
how can I help?
What year was Albert Einstein born?" Takes a second.
Albert Einstein was born on March 14th, 1879.
So it's almost like an Alexa device at home, and it does some pretty cool things here and there. And of course, you can use that functionality to open up certain climate control menus or adjust the temperature. It does all of that for you without you even having to take your hands off the steering wheel. Now, moving further to the passenger side, just a little bit more of that leather dashboard. Everything is soft touch material, leather wrapped. There's no hard touch plastics here, which is something you would expect from a vehicle of this price point. Moving further into the center arm console, I do get a little bit of Porsche vibes with these grab handles over here, but I do like that you have some ambient lighting around that along with some additional aluminum bezel. Looks really, really beautiful, especially as you're walking into the vehicle. You do have this piano black plastic here, which isn't my favorite, but I think it matches with the white and black interior. And then you slide this open and you have a wireless charging port with 2 USB ports, and you have heated and cooled cup holders. So that's something I haven't seen in very many other vehicles, but nice to have depending on what you're drinking. You can cover this back up to cover this area. And then moving further back, like I said, you do have your touchscreen controls over here. You do have a really beautiful toggle switch to go through your comfort settings or your sport settings. You do have a button to open up your 360-degree camera, and this is an amazing 360-degree camera because it's almost as if a drone is flying around you and showing you everything that's going on, all the way down to like the building that's located probably half a mile down the road. I mean, this is an amazing system. I don't know how they do it with software, but it's truly incredible. This is something that a lot of German vehicles are introducing, and I gotta say I love it. Even though I probably would never use it when I'm parking, it's just a pretty cool party trick. Further down from that, you do have your system settings that you can quickly open up, and then you do have a favorites button that you can actually program, and that way you push that button and open up whatever menu you want. On the right hand side, you have your volume switch, which is also a really nice aluminum bezel touch to it. You do have your quick access buttons for your navigation, your radio, and your telephone. And then further down from that, you do have this little arm pad so you can rest your palm and actually manipulate the touchscreen. And then behind that, you have another really nice aluminum toggle switch that you can use to raise and lower the suspension like I showed off earlier. You do have a really nice aluminum button to open up your center arm console, which is pretty good size. You do have one USB port in here. And then closing this up, it is a pretty soft arm console, so no complaints there. You could easily rest your elbow on here for long road trips. Coming above, the one complaint I do have about this interior is you don't have any type of rear view camera mirror, which really surprises me for a vehicle of this price point to not have something like that. I think a lot of the American brands have that, even in like Chevys and GMs. Moving further up, you do have your light controls, your light stack, just quick access buttons for that, and then you do have a toggle to open and close your large panoramic sunroof. Now, another little complaint I do have is even though the sunroof bar is pretty far back, the sunroof actually only opens up about halfway. It's actually a pretty small sunroof opening. I don't really get why they didn't let it go maybe another foot or so backwards, because you definitely have the space for it. But again, this isn't a convertible, this is just a SUV. The last thing I want to point out about the roof is you do have a suede headliner, which looks absolutely gorgeous. And that pretty much finishes off the front row seats. Now let's jump into the second row and talk about what that looks like. Now, jumping into the second row, it's just as nice as the first row. You have the same nice use of materials throughout the entire door panel, the aluminum bezels, and then you do have an automatic operated sunshade. So with the push of a button, either in the first or second row, it will raise and lower this sunshade so to keep all the other people outside. But really nice to see it's automatic and not just a manual sunshade like some cheap cars out there. The seats are just as nice as the front row, very comfortable, very plush. Now, jumping inside, I gotta say the legroom is absolutely massive. I mean, it's been a while since I've sat in a mid-size crossover before, but this one has 41 inches of legroom, which almost looks to be like S-Class territory in terms of space. Then you have 37 inches of headroom. So lots of space back there to stretch out. You could easily fit 3 people across. Now, you do have your own set of climate controls back there. Everything from auto climate control to directionally, you can point it towards your face or your feet. And below that, you do have 2 USB ports and a little compartment where you could put a wallet or something like that. Now, one complaint I do have is you don't have any type of household power outlet back there. That's a feature I've been seeing in a lot of just regular day-to-day cars, and I can't seem to find one anywhere inside of the cabin. So if you guys are aware if there is a power outlet, let me know down in the comments below. Now, jumping into the trunk area, there's not too much to report. You do have obviously an automatic trunk gate that opens, and inside you have about 33.3 inches of cargo room, and it's a pretty massive trunk space. I mean, you could easily fit enough luggage for a family of 5. On the left hand side, there's not much to report. There's just a few lighting controls and some hooks. On the right hand side, you do have a button or a switch that can actually raise and lower the suspension, so it can make it easier to load some Gucci luggage inside and outside of the vehicle without having to strain your back. And then you do have just a regular cigarette style outlet back there. I wish it did have a household power outlet. And then underneath the trunk space, you actually have a pretty large cargo space that's hidden, and that's typically where you find a spare tire, but this one does not have a spare tire in the back, not even a donut. You do have a fix-a-flat kit, and you have a little section where you can put your tonneau cover so that you can keep it out of space if you're loading some tall luggage. Now, if you lower the second row seats, you can actually get upwards of 75 cubic feet of space back there, which is pretty massive and definitely enough to put the 2x4s that you're going to be loading inside of the back of your GLE 63. Now, you may be wondering what's included in the AMG package specifically. Well, quite a few things. First off, of course, that 4-liter twin-turbo hand-built engine is part of the GLE 63. You also get updated styling, so you do have a different type of grille, a different front trim. You also do get these fender flares on the side. That's kind of specific to the AMG, specifically this wide body look to the back end. And then you also get different exhaust pipes, of course, and a different rear spoiler and rear diffuser. Finishing off the exterior, you also get adaptive high beams for the AMG package, and you do have these floodlights that shine on the ground as you open the door, which looks really nice. I'll overlay some footage of what that looks like in the evening. Now, although some of the safety tech you still have to pay for and upgrade above the base price of the GLE 63, for 2024 they did add some really nice touches as standard if you choose the 63S. First off, the panel roof is now standard on the GLE 63, along with heated and ventilated seats. Prior to that, you did have to pay for that option. Another standard feature is the Burmester audio system, which is really nice. Also, jumping inside, the GLE 63 now gets you the air purifier system, which is located in here inside of the glove compartment. You also have the augmented reality GPS system as standard now. The GLE 63 also includes the head-up display. You also get these multi-contour front seats. And of course, with this being the AMG, you do get the AMG performance exhaust as standard, and that is very nice to hear, especially when you're accelerating. Okay, now let's talk about pricing. Now, keep in mind, the numbers I'm about to quote are for the 2023 model year because 2024 pricing has not yet been released, even though this is a 2024 model year vehicle. I don't actually have the window sticker to compare. I imagine the pricing is going to be pretty similar year over year, but maybe the 2024 is a little bit more expensive. Now, the GLE 350 starts at just around $58,000. You can step up to the GLE 450, and that one's just about $67,000. Now, you can step up to the baby brother of this vehicle, which is the GLE 53, and that one starts at just around $77,000. Now, the GLE 580 with the big 4-liter twin-turbo V8, that one's around $84,000, and this top-of-the-line GLE 63S starts at just around $120,000. Now, in terms of reliability, it's really hard for me to say because I really have to own this vehicle for a long period of time, but just for your reference, US News and JD Power rate this vehicle 80 out of 100 in terms of reliability, and in their scale, that's actually an average rating. Now, in terms of warranty, every single new Mercedes comes with a 4-year, 50,000-mile limited warranty. Okay, now let's get behind the wheel and drive it. Real quick, I want to show you what the Mercedes key looks like. It's the same key they've been using for a couple years. You got your lock, unlock, you got your alarm, and then the automatic lift gate as well. Okay, so setting off in the Mercedes Benz GLE 63S. Now we're gonna hit the start-stop button, and because this vehicle has that EQ boost or that electric starter motor, you don't really get a cold start in this vehicle. It's kind of pretty subdued, as I'm sure you may have heard in the exhaust sound clip that I just showed off. But when you stomp on the gas pedal, once the car is on, then it sounds pretty good. Now, first thing I'm gonna have to do, because I absolutely love this feature, is I'm gonna turn on the massage seats throughout this entire review, because as silly as it sounds, that's gotta be one of my favorite features of this vehicle. Now, let's set off. We got the 360-degree camera here, which is incredibly useful. Okay, setting off here, One of the first things you'll notice, and what I noticed immediately after driving this vehicle for just, a couple minutes, is how quiet the interior cabin is. I mean, you would expect it from a Mercedes, but it really does just kind of surprise you. I mean, it's just so luxurious, so calming. You don't really know what's going on outside of the vehicle. In fact, even the exhaust, which, is actually pretty powerful when you're gunning on it, you don't really hear that inside of the vehicle when you're accelerating. Even in the race mode, it's still pretty subdued. Now, the other thing, as we're approaching this stoplight over here, the engine just shut off. And this has got to be the smoothest start-stop system in any vehicle I've experienced. Now, I haven't driven very many other new Mercedes, and so I think a lot of them share the same components, but that really has to do with that beefed up integrated starter motor. So as you're actually approaching a stop, this vehicle will shut off the engine. So it's not like most start-stop systems where you have to be completely stopped for it to shut off. This actually starts shutting off as you're driving to a stoplight, and it's a little bit weird at first, but then you get used to it and it's actually really smooth. Now, the engine just turned on. I'm sure you didn't even feel it. I can barely even hear it because of how quiet the vehicle is, but that is something that's taken a little bit getting used to, but I've been very impressed with it. One thing though that does get a little bit annoying is sometimes when you're approaching like very low speeds, the engine will shut off, but then, as the traffic moves along, you start accelerating, there's a little bit of a lag between the engine starting back up. And that's something I've experienced just a handful of times, but it's been enough that's kind of irked me a little bit and forced me to want to turn off that start-stop feature because it does result in a little bit of a delay in accelerating. Now, one of the side effects about having a vehicle that's so quiet on the inside is it's easy to get in a lot of trouble in this vehicle when it comes to speed, because you're going 50, 60 miles an hour. You may not actually be able to tell that you're going that fast because it's so quiet and composed inside of the cabin. So just keep that in mind. That is a good side effect, but something to be wary of. Now, let's talk about the drive modes here as we're about to accelerate. So you do have comfort, you've got your individual mode where you can customize it. There's also a sport mode, a sport plus, and then for this on-ramp acceleration, we're gonna put it into race mode. And that just puts the whole suspension, exhaust, everything in its most powerful setting. And let's do a quick acceleration. So talking about the power, as my camera just shifted, let's put it back into comfort mode. What you will notice is in comfort mode, this thing is a little bit softer on bumps. So when I'm gonna be talking about ride quality, I'm actually gonna put it in comfort mode because I don't think it's fair to put this vehicle into sport plus mode or race mode and talk about comfort, because the suspension does adapt based on what setting you're in. Talking about the acceleration, this thing is wickedly quick after you get past a little bit of that turbo lag. And that kind of surprises me because not only does this vehicle have that electric motor, integrated starter motor that kind of gives you a little bit extra boost, but this is also a V8 engine, granted a smaller one at 4 liters, but you do still have a little bit of turbo lag here. So when you're talking, 0 to maybe 15, it takes maybe a second and a half for it to really kick in. But once you get into the higher RPM range, once that turbo spools up, this thing has just gobs of power. And the transmission, which is a 9-speed automatic, is very quick to downshift, upshift. So I've downshifted and then power right into it. I mean, it sounds really good. It feels really good. I think from like 30 to 70, this thing does that in probably about like 2 seconds. Now 0 to 60 time, like I mentioned earlier, it's 3.7 seconds. I'm at a higher elevation here in Utah, so it's not going to perform as well, but performance is really good here, especially when you're really on it, at the 30 mile an hour and up range. Now, comparing this to the X5M I reviewed a couple years ago, was a used X5M, I think it was 2018. This thing feels more powerful when you're going from like 30 to, 70. When you're actually just going from like 0 to 50, I don't know if this is that much different than that one. Keep in mind, since that X5M was a little bit older, it had less horsepower. The latest and greatest always pack in more horsepower, more torque. I'm gonna downshift here and then gun it. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly fast, incredibly fast. And then talking about corners here as we're taking this little curve on the freeway, it stays pretty planted. Now, you know, physics can't hide. This is gonna be a little bit more wobbly than your low-slung sports cars, but honestly, going 65, 70 on that curve really didn't make any difference for me because I felt very planted and very sure-footed in terms of the handling of this vehicle. But again, it's not a sports car. It's just got a very good suspension for handling curves, better than majority of SUVs I've driven. Now, I do want to talk about the safety features here because they're pretty robust, some of the best in the industry. Now, when you turn it on using the haptic feedback on your steering wheel, simple to turn on just like every other cruise control. But once this vehicle sets the speed, this thing will actually keep you in between the lanes. Now, what I like about this system though is a lot of systems you kind of have to wiggle the steering wheel every so often just for it to know that you're holding on, whereas here, by simply just touching the steering wheel, this vehicle has sensors on the steering wheel so it knows that you're actually holding the steering wheel and not having to jiggle it just for it to know that you're paying attention. So today I drove for about half an hour with just my hand on the steering wheel, and as you can see, we're approaching this curve, and even if I let go of the steering wheel, this vehicle will actually track the curve and keep going on the freeway. Really, really robust safety features. And what's even better is if I turn on the blinker, this thing will actually make the turn for me. So we just shifted lanes and I didn't even touch the steering wheel. So really impressive system here from Mercedes. You know, this is rated one of the best in the industry. And I think they're really a leader along with some of the other German brands in terms of some of the best safety tech. So we're just gonna do a quick downshift. I just wanna do a little pull on the freeway and see how it handles. Yeah, I mean, at the higher speeds, this thing pulls more powerful than the X5M I reviewed. I'm really impressed with the power. So this is a 4MATIC all-wheel drive system, and most of the time all-wheel drive systems can send maybe 50%, maybe 60 to the back, whereas in the AMG 63S, it can send 100% of the power to the back, making it feel pretty much like a muscle car. I mean, that's what I love about Mercedes, is they are probably the most muscle car-like German brand that's out there. I mean, they just do some really crazy things, and I'm so glad they've still kept a V8 engine under the hood of the 63S. I mean, this may be the last generation where you can get a V8, because even the C63 now is getting a 4-cylinder. So I mean, the fact that you can still get a V8 under the hood for a 63S is really just amazing, and you better buy one now because it's not going to last forever. Okay, now next up, I do want to talk about the ride quality and comfort of this vehicle. And for this segment, I specifically chose a really bad road here that we have in Utah, which is pretty much every road, but specifically this one, it's been damaged by a lot of the snow we had over the winter. And what I will say about the comfort and ride quality, as you may be able to see on the screen, is this isn't by any means a Mercedes S-Class when it comes to the ride quality and comfort. But that being said, this is definitely going to be softer than any sports car you've ever driven. I mean, it really is amazing what they're able to do by mixing performance and comfort into one vehicle. I mean, consider the fact that this is sitting on 22-inch wheels with low-profile tires. This thing actually is really comfortable. Now, there are softer SUVs out there for sure, but are there softer SUVs out there that have over 600 horsepower and can do 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds? Probably not. It really is amazing what they're able to accomplish with just some amazing engineering. Okay, so to finish off this video, what are my overall thoughts on the AMG GLE 63S? Well, by no means is this vehicle affordable. I mean, at just north of $120,000, that's, you know, some people's mortgages depending on where you live. At the same time, if you're looking for a vehicle that does 0 to 60 in about 3.7 seconds, has over 600 horsepower, you're probably looking at a sports car that's at or above $100,000. With this, on the other hand, you also get the utility of having 5 massive seats, tons of luxury creature comforts on the inside. I mean, this is a big SUV with the powertrain of a sports car. You kind of get the best of both worlds here, even though this is an expensive vehicle. At the same time, the competition is no cheaper either. If you're looking at the BMW X5M or the Audi RSQ8, those all start in a very similar price range, just north of $120,000. And this one actually isn't the most expensive out of the pack. If you're looking at the Porsche Cayenne Turbo or Turbo S, you're looking at anywhere between $135,000 to $171 grand. So as crazy as it sounds, the GLE 63S is kind of a bargain in this type of segment. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Would you consider one of these vehicles? Because you do get quite a bit of bang for your buck considering all the performance and the practicality of a crossover, but there's also a lot of good competition out there as well. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car reviews and different car videos. As always, everybody, I hope you stay schwazy, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day.